Okay, hi Ayat, hi Joanne. Thank you so much for joining me here today on Vonvo.com. Today is March 2nd, 2013, and just before we got started with our conversation, I just wanted to go over two quick ground rules. The first is that here at Vonvo, we are all about our discussions. Here at Vonvo, right now I'm recording this conversation, and after the conversation is complete, I'll be uploading the discussion to our YouTube channel. Is that okay with both of you?
Yes, fine. Yep.
Okay, great. And then on top of that, here at Vonvo, we're all about our discussion staying both civil and valuable. We don't want there to be any personal attacks on anyone, and everyone to stay respectful of one another. Are you guys okay with that last ground rule?
Goes without saying, Max.
All right, perfect. So then let's get started. We're here to discuss the Middle East region as a whole. Aya, if you could, and then Joanne afterwards, for all of our people that are listening in and who might watch this video, would you mind just giving a quick background of yourself?
Yeah, sure. Go first.
Okay, thanks, Joanne. So my name is Aya Samnena, and I'm a Canadian Libyan based in Canada, and I recently got involved with what was going on in the Middle East through the revolution in Libya, and co-founded something called the Libyan Youth Movement.
Great.
And I'm Joanna from the UK, and I started my interest in the Middle East with the problems in Iraq when I was trying to help refugees, and it's carried on from there, from Iraq to Iran, and also Libya, Tunisia, and now Syria.
Great. So, ultimately, when looking at the Middle East region as a whole, currently, right now, Ayat, what is your take on the state of this region compared to, let's say, other time periods in the past?
I would describe the region at this point in time as something very shifting in nature. It's a really critical time. It's a time where things happening now will definitely have an impact on the region and on international relations down the line. So it is very, I wouldn't say unstable, but I would say things that happen now affect what will happen for the future generations. So it is very fragile. That being said, the region feels bigger than it has ever felt before, with every country having its own isolated issues to deal with, and with every country kind of being more and more involved with the rest of the world. So it just makes the region that much more important, and the impact that that region has on the world that much larger.
Right. And Joanne, go ahead. Would you agree or disagree? Do you have anything?
Yeah, I agree to a certain extent, and I'm just wondering if the fact that so many young people are now becoming more highly educated and they can see what's happening in the world, if this has had an effect on why these revolutions are set up, why they're demanding freedom for themselves. I'm very worried about the influence that Iran is having on the whole region, because there's no two ways about it. Iran is delving in all the regions there.
Right. So basically, does it boil down to a level of interconnectivity between the different countries in the region that's really like the level of that has never been as high as it's been today? Is that kind of what you're getting at, Ayat, that I'm hearing?
Yeah, I think so. That, and as well as the region being connected with the rest of the world, that it just makes the region that much more important.
Right.
And I think that ties in with Joanne's point that with every young person being educated, every young person now identifying themselves as an individual, makes it that much more critical because more young people are wanting to participate on what goes on in their country and how they are perceived by the rest of the world.
Yes, I agree.
Right. And so, where are you guys seeing, is there different areas of the Middle East, though, that are still having, a ton of people uneducated? Like, I remember someone coming on last weekend, it was these two Turkish, TV show hosts who have a pretty big following, and they were talking about how, right now, there still is a high level of uneducated people that are, let's say, beginning to practice like the wrong aspects of, let's say, like Islam, and it's resulting in there still being bad apples in that region that are kind of promoting the wrong things. I mean, what's the state of people being educated and having a better idea of the world around them? Can you guys like talk about that?
Do you want to go first, Diet?
I'll let you go ahead, John.
Yeah. I find that most of the people who are not well educated, the ones who are in sort of little villages in the mountains and places like that where access to education is extremely difficult. And I've been trying to help in some ways to, get them to speak English and put them in touch with groups that can help them. I find that there is a demand for education. So many of them say, "Can you help me with my English? Can you help me to get some education? I need to. If I want to do something with my life, I need education."
Right. Go ahead, Ayat.
I think it definitely depends on what we consider to be education and what we consider to be awareness. Because I think overall you can say that the entire region has recently become aware of their circumstance, and that's why we've seen the revolutions take place, that people are realizing, hey, this is a situation we don't want to continue living in, and we want to get our lives back. And so they did have education to a certain extent for them to realize that we need to change the situation we're in. But they are definitely lacking the education right now that they need to move forward in a really progressive and effective way, and that kind of would diminish the large problems that we're seeing right now. So I definitely agree with Joanne, and I mean, knowledge is power, and that's how these regimes have been able to kind of control their people for so long, by keeping them oppressed, keeping them ignorant of what's going on around them, and basically denying them that right to kind of educate themselves on what they can do to help themselves on a personal level, and on a larger societal level.
Right.
Yeah,
go ahead, Joanne. Yeah, go ahead, Joanne.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was wondering if she found that women are not being offered the same opportunities as men. I find that in Iran, they don't want the women to be educated. I mean, they started to separate the women from the men in the colleges, and then they're gradually easing out the women, so they're not getting educated.
I think what we see in terms of the patterns as it relates to gender in the region really depends on what are the ideologies and the sometimes religious rhetoric that are being used by the ruling power. I think we can say that the region has seen points in time where empowered, and then other times where women were oppressed. And right now, it really depends on the region. I can say, with respect to Libya in particular, women have largely been able to access, their basic education and even higher education. They're enrolled in universities almost in par with the male population. Where we see the issues are the opportunities to kind of grow from that. Once they have an education, society kind of adopts them into a greater role, and that's kind of where we struggle. And I don't know if it's in Libya, if it's kind of like we are excluding a gender. I think it's we are coming out of an era where there was this regime that didn't really involve women, so we're trying to just get out of that situation. But I do agree with you. In some regions, unfortunately, their ideologies are kind of extremist, and they do not want to have women participate in the greater public sphere, and that is a huge problem.
So can you like dive a little bit into that more? You know, I really, in terms of Libya, when did you move from Libya?
I was 6 years old when we left.
Right, and from what you recall or what your parents tell you, you know, in terms of women not having a role in like society, what was that like, or what do they tell you how that like?
Well, all my female relatives, including my mother, have higher education. I mean, my mom was doing her master's when we left, and she had been working as well. So in terms of that, it really depended on the family that you had kind of grew up in. If education was something they valued, and I could say most families in Libya do, you would see women getting educated. The problem is the regime didn't really empower anyone really like on a fair basis that they could kind of like have an education, work hard, and kind of get a position that would equate to their education or their work experience. It was really about who you knew and how you could benefit the regime, and in a sense, you would get rewarded by the regime. So that really excluded people who didn't believe in the same things that the regime wanted to kind of wanted to impose on the people. So it really related to the regime directly, and the regime didn't discriminate just against women. And it discriminated against men, discriminated against young people who we see today, who we saw 2 years ago, step out against the regime. So in that sense, Libya faced the discrimination of all parts of society. And I think that right now we're just kind of coming out of that, and we want to bring women into the public sphere more, even though they have been educated, they are working. It's just that, that higher level that they kind of deserve because they are quite well established in their field.
Right. Joanne, did you have anything to add on top of that?
I've got quite a few Libyan friends. Some of them I met when they were over here for education, and their attitude doesn't seem to encourage women to get educated. I've had quite long conversations with them, and said, well, why not? Because a woman is just as capable, and why shouldn't she be able to fulfill a career? And they just said, no. When I get married, my wife will stay at home. She's not going to be educated. She's not going to go out to work. That's my job, to look after her and the family. And I said, well, come on, it's the 21st century. They still insist that they want, a lot of them want their wives to stay at home and not have a career.
Right.
It's disheartening.
Right, and so do you think that the idea of this concept is now changing throughout the region? Is it being seen across all the different countries where women are playing a major role? And what do you think that that item itself? What do you think? How do you think that role is shaping the region, Ayat?
I really feel strongly about reiterating the fact that the Middle East sees waves of progress, and it really depends on who wants to run the show at the time. If you have an Islamist or an extremist government in place, they will try to oppress women, and you will see that take shape after. If they are progressive, then you will see women in society, and people start to. So, when my parents were in university, it was quite liberal at the time. And women were in the public sphere and they were getting educated. And then when, in the 80s, when there was, in the 90s, there was kind of wave of Islamism in the region, which is not bad by all means. But when you have those extremist minorities that are trying to keep women at home, like Joanne was saying, that does have an impact on the greater social sphere. So I don't want to make it sound like now women are, coming out of the woodwork and finally have this epiphany to join society. It's really waves that we've seen. It's kind of like these separate, isolated cycles where women are empowered and then they're oppressed and then they're empowered. And I think we can see that around the world throughout history. So I just wanted to make sure that wasn't just like, after, hundreds of years, women in the Middle East are finally waking up. It's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
I think Egypt is another country,
yeah.
Max.
Go ahead.
Where I've seen, I've been over to Egypt 3 times since the revolution, and I've seen that women had more freedom before the revolution, that they're now being made to cover up where they were not forced to before, but at the moment they're wanting to enforce the hijab onto the women, and they tend to keep them at home too. They want their women, they really want the men, the young men too. They want to repress the women, and after going through a revolution, I can't understand why they wouldn't want their women folk to have basic freedoms.
Right. So one of our viewers named Raphael asked a question. I guess this is just really your opinion. Which country in the Arab world do you believe is the most progressive towards women? And maybe if you want to answer that question like in 2 parts, like one pre like Arab Spring, and then now current to date. Do you have an opinion on that?
I would say maybe the most progressive regions in the Middle East towards women before the revolution, something like the United Arab Emirates comes to mind. But I'd say after the revolution, we're seeing more and more women come out and join the sphere. We're seeing with the reforms in constitutions and governments and the actual complete rebuilding in Libya, women are kind of stepping out there to make sure that their gender is being represented. So in most recent elections in Libya, we saw 32 members of parliament be elected into office. So that's kind of a very high percentage for the region. I wouldn't say Libya is the best for women altogether, but the issues that Libya faces with respect to women aren't as heightened as, say, in Egypt, where you're having these extreme ideologies come out and try to oppress women, as I was saying. And it's a bigger issue. There's a lot more people in Egypt than there are in Libya. They have a lot more history to kind of delve through and sort their issues out. But I think the whole region as a whole is coming through this awakening, and women are seizing this opportunity to kind of bring their issues to the forefront. And Holly has more to say about this.
And quickly, Joanne, before you speak, would you mind just putting your mouse over your camera, and there's a little volume button. Could you just raise that all the way to the highest?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Joanne.
Yeah. I forgot what I'm going to say now, but I do agree so much with Ayat. I'm just, visiting these countries and I'm trying to find out. I don't just go for a holiday. I like to meet the people and talk to them, see what their take is on their country at this time.
Do you have an opinion on
all kinds?
Joanne? Do you have an opinion on which country seems to be the most progressive these days from your research?
Well, I was thinking Egypt until my last visit. But I've only been back 3 weeks, and I found more and more of the women were actually, instead of just walking around with a scarf, it was the full hijab. Even very young ones, even the children. And I was a bit dismayed by that because that is a change from what I've seen in the other visits. And they didn't like talking to me. I was there with my son, and they didn't even want to speak to my son.
Why was that? Can you go into that? What do you think the reasoning was behind it?
Well, they said it's because it's un-Islamic to speak to a man who is not a relative.
It's un-Islamic. It's un-Islamic to speak to who again?
To a man who is not a relative.
Oh, okay. Does that sound correct, Ayat, from what Joanne's stating?
It sounds like one of the many ideologies that is being spread on the Egyptian street. It's definitely not a majority, but unfortunately, like Joanne was saying earlier, when you have issues of education and issues of empowerment where people don't know how to kind of bring themselves into a situation where they are not being oppressed anymore, you do have these extremist ideologies making huge waves in the population. But like I was saying, those that are educated do not kind of struggle with these issues. But when a revolution happens and you have complete rehashing of the fibers of the society at the time, you're going to have all this unwanted, marginalized kind of extreme ideologies that are not going to bring the next wave or the next era of youth forward. So they are issues that have to be dealt with, and I think it goes hand in hand with wanting to have the freedom to kind of express yourself and to have your human rights that these people fought for, but having others that don't quite understand those freedoms and not knowing that those freedoms need to be respected. And yes, you can express yourself, but no, you can't impose your beliefs on others. And I think that's what's happening when in terms of the say the Salafists in Egypt, or some of the Muslim Brotherhood who are not really respecting the rights of everyone else.
Right. And so, Joanne, did you have anything to add on top of that, or?
It does seem as if whole things changed because of the Brotherhood. I really believe that is the point out there. Things have changed dramatically since the Brotherhood took power.
Right. So, the Brotherhood as a whole party throughout the region, or just in Egypt? Can you elaborate on that?
It seems as if it is going through the region. I have heard, I don't know if it's true, but I've heard that they're in Libya too. And from what I've heard, there are some in Syria. I think it is trying to get a foothold in all of the Islamic countries because they want to bring back strict Sharia law. And, they're not letting the countries decide on what they want for themselves.
What's your take on the Muslim Brotherhood? Why don't we go into that topic, because I feel like that has a lot of that has a lot of substance to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I was saying earlier that the former regimes had oppressed everyone, they had oppressed those with various religious beliefs. when it comes to, and now we're seeing those religious beliefs come out into the streets now that the regimes are gone, there's no restrictions really, so they're kind of running amok. But when it comes to the Muslim Brotherhood, they're a very organized organization, and they are well connected. They've been networking since its establishment. I think that the Muslim Brotherhood was born in Egypt in the 60s or earlier, if I remember. And so they've been around for a long time, and they're a very tight network, and they're very well established. And they didn't stop during the kind of former regimes. They organized themselves abroad. They got themselves educated. And so now that their regimes have fallen, they are kind of taking this moment as their time to kind of step into the forefront. And that's unfortunate, because just because you were able to kind of stay organized while the regimes were oppressing the rest of the people, and now that you're the most capable of, say, you know, coming into society and trying to run the show, it doesn't mean that you and your ideologies can come in and impose those beliefs on everyone. And I don't think it's fair. I think it's opportunistic, and it's just really infringing on these people's rights as people who can choose their government freely, who can choose what their society is made up of, and it's extremely disturbing for them to want to come on to the scene now, and when constitutions are being written and the history of a country is being completely starting off from a clean slate, to want to start it that way, just because they happen to be the most prepared. I mean, everyone else is on the same page. They're kind of like starting with a blank slate. They want to rebuild the country, and the Muslim Brotherhood is coming with their baggage. So I don't want to see them, Joanne was saying they're spreading in the region, and it's true, they are. They're present everywhere, and we're just lucky in Libya to not have elected them. And if we had, it would have been a really disheartening situation, and I hope that it stays that way. I don't want to see them thrive. I don't think that they have the country's best interest in mind. They have their best interest in mind.
Right. Go ahead, Joanne.
Yeah, I was thinking about the Muslim, the Brotherhood there. They are interfering with the Coptics in Egypt. I belong to also to a group called SAT7. They are Coptics, and they're trying, and to get their rights too, because they're trying to drive them out of Egypt. They're really abused, those people. They're very proud of their religion. In fact, I don't know if you know that they have a cross tattooed on their wrists. They're very proud to show off, and they often put their hand up to show you the cross. When if anybody starts talking about Islam, they put their hand up to please the Coptics, and they're really affecting our church.
Right. So is it true to say, Ayat, that this idea of spreading like Sharia law, is that all that the Muslim Brotherhood really does believe in? Is that like a myth? What's the status of these authorities that have this baggage? They obviously got elected inside of Egypt, but what is the status on like them communicating that sort of I guess religious ideologies to like their populations? Because like you hear about Egypt having a little less a lesser strict Muslim Brotherhood than, let's say, what might pop up in Syria, and then you're saying perhaps they could have even popped up in Libya, and thank God they didn't. Like, what can you just tell us? What you're saying, that they are the most prepared government authority, but what exactly is it that they stand for? Can you go into that, please?
I mean, right now their platform is definitely about kind of Islamic ideologies, and obviously reviving the use of Sharia law. However, I'm not too familiar with their specifics, what kind of extent of interpretation they want to go into Sharia law in society. But the one thing that I do know is that they want to be in power and they want to help themselves and their own networks. So just from that aspect, it's not representative. It's just not fair to have a group that is just concerned about themselves and their own interests to kind of represent an entire nation. So those are kind of my personal issues with the Brotherhood.
Mm-hmm. Joanne, do you have a different take on, like, what do you know about what they are, spreading in that region?
Well, they're going to make things. I think they're going to make things difficult for tourists because they're going to bring in some new laws regarding the dress code. Even in the tourist resorts that are. I mean, I've been to Sharm el Sheikh, and that is purely a tourist resort. It's not a place where normal Egyptians live. The only people who live in Sharm are, I'm told, are workers. They don't let anybody else in. So if you're in a place like Sharm, I don't see what harm it would do. I don't say women walk around in bikinis, unless they're on a beach for a while, and there are nice beaches where the secluded places you can have a bikini. But to sort of put more restrictions after all these years of people being able to go on holiday, put money into their economy, which they badly need, and then to be told, oh, you can't drink. You're not allowed any alcohol at all. This is what's coming in. It's already been mooted in their talks, and tourists are not going to go. That's going to have a bad effect on their economy. I just don't think they should be so how can I put it, repressive. It wasn't like this before. Even under Mubarak, they didn't have so much repression. I'm just totally against the Muslim Brotherhood running that country because it's not good for their people.
Right, and so what I was going to ask is, someone inside the text chat asked, how much influence does the Arab League have over the Arab Spring? What is the Arab League's reaction to the Arab Spring Revolution?
Judging by the lack of help in Syria, I would say it doesn't have any. Nobody is supporting the Syrian civilians or the FSA. You've got Russia, China, Iran and Hezbollah bombing the hell out of that country, doing unspeakable tortures on people, and none of the Arab nations are doing anything to help. They're not even saying, this is wrong, stop it. They're doing nothing. So I don't think it's helping the people at all. I don't know what the answer is because they don't want the West to go in and interfere. And I would have thought that it would have been the Arab nations that could have gone into Syria. They could have tried to talk to Assad and get these things sorted out properly. Stop bombing innocent civilians that aren't doing anything. People in their own homes. People in queues for bread. School children playing in a playground. Just bomb them. Deliberately target innocent people, and nobody is saying anything to them.
Right.
I've seen some unspeakable things this week.
Do you have anything to add on top of that?
Yeah, in terms of the influence of the Arab League, before the UN passed, the Security Council passed the resolution on the no-fly zone over Libya, they got the go-ahead from the Arab League. The Arab League came to a consensus to support the UN should they go ahead and decide to help Libya. So that was probably the only thing that the Arab League has done in terms of the Arab Spring overall, but we'll have to recognize that the Arab League is made up of representatives from, the entire region. Those representatives are coming from countries where they're either newly out of revolution, they still have a regime in place, or they have some sort of a kingdom going on. And every nation has its own allies and alliances with West and with the rest of the world. And so the conflicts that we're having right now, these countries are bound in several ways. They have to stay true to their own country, they have to stay true to their alliances, and they have to kind of consider what's going on in the region. So, unfortunately, that makes for an Arab League that has no backbone and that can't speak out against injustice, namely what we're seeing in Syria today. So it's quite, disheartening, but that's the situation in the Middle East, that every country has its own friends, and it reacts to the region accordingly. And it also won't react unless it absolutely has to, and it won't react unless it benefits them, and it won't react unless it's completely black and white for them. Add any gray area, and everyone is paralyzed, and that's really what the nature of these leaders in the region are like, unfortunately. And that really is something that I, as an Arab youth, think that needs to be changed in this new kind of post-Arab Spring era. We really do see them as kind of dysfunctional.
Right. Go ahead, Joanne.
I agree to a certain extent with Ayat said that someone should step in and very, very quickly and just stop this mass genocide. There's not going to be a country left. Every town, every city under heavy bombardment. And it said 70,000 are dead in Syria. There's a heck of a lot more than 70,000 dead. You can't bomb whole residential areas out and only have a few dead. It's just beyond belief, and nobody is trying anything to stop it.
So, so my question would be is, you guys have been examining this region for a little while now. What is your take on what needs to happen in order to change the way this region sort of operates within one another? What are some things that clearly just have not worked for a while now that you easily could say need to really change?
I'll let Ayat start.
Okay.
I think that, in the region we're recognizing that people are coming out and saying, enough is enough, and we want to ask for our freedoms. We want to have what other people around the world have. Namely the West. Democracy is a term that, is kind of equated with that kind of progress. But you can't have that if you're just going to have people's freedom and then not guarantee them in any way, shape, or form. If you're just going to have all these new players come onto the scene and kind of take advantage of the situation, the fact that there is no regime, there's no rule of law, there's no constitution protecting the people's rights, and you want to come in with your own game plan and say, okay guys, this is now how we're going to do things. That's not progress. That's not the freedom that the people want. As a Libyan, I want to see the Constitution take shape as soon as possible. I want to see my rights as a person, as an individual, as a citizen protected. And I want to have the rule of law in my country so that I can work, so that I can get educated, so that I can participate in the rebuilding process of my country. But I can't have that when everything is running havoc, and we have people with weapons, we have, you know, people coming in and out of the country without anyone telling them, you know, you can come in, you can leave, you can smuggle weapons, you can't smuggle weapons, is actually ridiculous. So we can't say, oh, the people, you know, have come out of the Arab Spring, they've asked for their freedoms, and things are going to move forward now. No, they're not going to move forward if you don't protect all this work that they've done, and you don't protect their rights and freedoms as human beings. So that's kind of like where the first stage has to take place. In Egypt, they're struggling with the same issue. They're having a constitution imposed on them that they don't want and doesn't represent them. So until we get past those initial foundations, it's a joke. And I mean, not to mention, the region cannot move forward when one part of the region is being bombed daily in and out for the past 2 years now. That's not progress. So progress in the region has to have peace, it has to have an actual rule of law, and a constitution that represents its people so that they can move forward. Without that, we're just talking nonsense.
Yeah, that's Assad's reforms. Said he's reforming the
Good.
He's reforming the country.
Right. So, Yaya, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you great. Do you guys hear Yaya?
Yeah, loud and clear. Welcome, Yaya.
Okay, great.
So,
Thank you.
Yaya, go ahead and ask what if you had a question or a statement that you wanted to bring up to either of our speakers. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I got here kind of late, so I might have, this actually might have already been addressed, but I saw that the discussion was about the Muslim Brotherhood. And right now I'm in Egypt. I live in Egypt, and I just wanted to give a really small, short historical background of the Brotherhood, just so that people understand that when some people speak about the Brotherhood, it means different things than what other people are speaking about. Specifically, the Muslim Brotherhood, the Ikhwan al-Muslimin, they started at the beginning of the 19th century, or the middle of the beginning of the 19th century, by Hassan al-Banna. And another known author was Sayyid Qutb. Now, in that time period, Sayyid Qutb and Hassan al-Banna, they had a certain understanding of what they wanted, how they wanted to reshape the Middle East, how they wanted to reshape specifically Egypt, but then beyond as well. And the message that they came with is actually different from what is being preached today. It should be understood that, you know, when you speak about the Muslim Brotherhood, there are two different and some could even say there's more than two, but there's at least two different messages and two different plans and so forth that this group has been you know, coming forth with. So as far as the Sayyid Qutb and the Hassan al-Banna, they were more directed towards establishing an Islamic state, establishing Islam in not just in Egypt but elsewhere as well. What you have now, though, due to the you can call it the oppression of Mubarak and those before him as well, and the colonialization of Egypt over the many years, the Muslim Brotherhood itself had to somewhat decline from certain beliefs and certain views that they had regarding the establishment of a complete Islamic state, and they went towards the side now of democracy, which is why we see them in the elections and in the politics and so forth. And this is not just in Egypt; they're even in like the parliament in Jordan and so forth. So their ideology is not completely Islamic now, what we're talking about today. So when we look at the different groups, different factions, different organizations today, and we have the Muslim Brotherhood as being a prominent figure, we have to understand that there's a historical evolution that took place, and that if you want to understand the Brotherhood, you have to look at it. Are you understanding it from the current understanding of who the Brotherhood is, or looking at it from the original understanding? Especially when you get into things like the so-called jihadist movements, who take a lot of their inspiration in modern times from the Sayyid Qutb, who was one of the original members of the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, that message is completely disconnected from the current message of the Muslim Brotherhood. The original message completely different. Before it was more so complete reform, complete change, complete obliteration, so to speak, of the secular systems and the complete implementation of the traditional Islamic system. So it's important. I just wanted to make that distinction. I know that we'll be speaking about modern politics. So obviously, when we speak about Muslim Brotherhood in modern times, we have to look at it from one perspective. But if we're looking at it from a historical perspective, we might take heed to look at it from that perspective as well.
Right. So, Joanne or Ayat, do you have an opinion on what Yahya just mentioned?
Can't see him, Max.
Oh, sorry. Joanne and Ayat, do you have an opinion?
I can't hear you, Max.
Yeah. Do you hear me now?
Yes, hear you now, Max.
Do you guys have an opinion?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Do you have an opinion on what Yahya just mentioned?
Ayat, you go ahead.
Ayat? Yeah, go
well,
ahead.
obviously, there's no denying history, right? So Yahya's just introduced the historical background, and as you said, we are seeing them leaning towards democracy more and wanting to be, introduced into kind of the sphere by being elected into power and whatnot. So that's all fine. I mean, everyone else and their ideology is doing that too. That's just the nature of the game right now. So, yeah, I mean, I have nothing to say. I mean, I can't argue his points. He's bringing a historical element, and I appreciate that.
Right,
I agree, but they can't have complete Islamization. They've got to take into account the other faiths that are in that country, and especially the Coptics. I'm a little concerned about the Coptics there. Yeah. What's your views on the Coptics?
I mean, Joanne, just wanted to add to that. I mean, just because the Muslim Brotherhood might want to be representing or want to kind of have Islam as their mandate, that doesn't mean that it represents every Muslim. I mean, let alone every other minority.
Right, definitely. Regarding what I had just said, that definitely no organization, pretty much no organization can have a monopoly on the understanding of Islam and how Islam is supposed to be implemented and so forth. This is a much longer discussion. Just to speak about the issue of the Coptics and the other religions in the region, and specifically in this country. First off, the only thing I'll take issue with, and it's nothing major, is that to have a complete Islamization of the country, for example, if that was to occur, that doesn't necessarily mean that the religious freedoms of the Coptics would necessarily be threatened. Perhaps, maybe from one perspective or another, yes, but not in the sense of, I think how some people think that forced conversions and these types of things would occur. Just knowing that Egypt for well over 1,000 years was under Islamic rule, and the Coptics were still here, and they existed. Now, if someone could bring up an issue or case here or there about some oppression or whatever, that will happen against Muslims, against Christians, against everyone. I mean, this happens, and that's why we need to keep a check on the government and make sure that the government is doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is establishing justice, upholding the laws. So I understand that people are afraid that if you have a religious rule that it will necessarily impact other people of other religions. But the truth is that's the same with every form of government. Democracy is the same way. If somebody's a communist, he will feel threatened by democracy. If someone's a socialist, he will feel threatened by libertarianism. This happens regardless of whichever religion or ideology or philosophy you have in power. those who do not share that philosophy or that ideology or that religion will feel threatened in some form, some way. Hopefully that will be minimized depending on who is actually implementing the rules and who's actually the government, who actually the government is. So I understand the concern, but I think that it can be used broad way throughout the entire world, really.
Great. So what I was going to just say quickly is, right now we're coming up on almost an hour that we've been speaking, Ayat. There are some people inside the room that have been submitting some other questions via the text chat. If you want to continue speaking with Yahya or Joanne, that's more than fine. I'm actually going to be going to get a room started regarding Syria, which Joanne was actually scheduled to speak in, if she still wants to. So feel free to continue your discussion. But I just wanted to thank you for your time, and I was going to be leaving in a minute or so to just get that room with those speakers started. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm willing to hang around and answer a few more questions just to kind of wrap this up, if that's okay with everyone.
Yeah, definitely. Because there's been some questions that were submitted, and that would be great. Okay?
And thank you, Yahya. It was quite interesting listening to you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Yeah, I am.